Hi, I'm Tristan Hall and welcome to another episode of the Alpha Tutorials podcast. Today we're going to take a look in a little bit more detail at the Sony Alpha A77, and we're also going to talk about the way your camera reads light and how it exposes the photograph. Let's kick off with the Alpha A77. The first video we produced around this camera, we produced it pretty much within an hour or so of having got our hands on the camera for the first time. Now, 2 firmware upgrades later, we are able to talk a little bit more about the quality of the camera in detail, and a full review will go up on the Alpha Tutorials website as well. We only got the 2nd firmware upgrade yesterday. What we've got with the A77 and some key things that we've come to like with the camera as we've been using it. The optical viewfinder, or lack of optical viewfinder in exchange for an OLED viewfinder, has been one of the most surprising benefits of the camera for us. The OLED viewfinder is a lot higher resolution than the electronic viewfinder we're used to in the A33 or the A55, for example. And it gives you a fantastic preview of what the image is going to look like when you hit that shutter button, far more accurately than what we've experienced before on the other SLT cameras from Sony. And it has a better contrast range and better color accuracy as well. So that has been an amazing thing. I never thought the day would come where I'd say that an electronic viewfinder is actually nicer to work with than an optical viewfinder. But I think I'm actually at that point where I can honestly say this camera is better to use in my personal experience than an optical viewfinder is. The other great thing about the camera has been the image quality. I was very nervous when Sony said that they were going to cram 24 megapixels onto an APS-C size sensor. And we've done a little bit of testing now with the new firmware we got yesterday, and we've put a few shots against the Alpha 850, which is also 24 megapixels, but on a full frame sensor. And the image quality has been surprisingly good. We were already blown away with the A77. It was better than what we expected it to be. But the image quality against the A850 was a lot closer than what we expected as well. So they really have done significant work on the sensor, as well as the way the camera handles noise and things like that in the image processing. The other amazing thing with the camera has been the 12 frames a second, and that has worked really, really well. The autofocus is incredibly quick, so the two combined make for a great machine. There is one slight limitation with the camera, and that is in 12 frames per second. Let's quickly take that ISO up there a bit for us and take the lens cap off. At 12 frames a second, you're going to get about 17 shots before it starts slowing down. And the challenge with that is that you're not going to get more than about 2 seconds or not even 2 seconds of action. So you've got to be a little bit precise about when you're going to use that. And you need to use a high-speed memory card. Go for the fastest SD cards you possibly can. Because if you go for a slow card, it's going to take longer to get those 17 shots onto the card and a longer period of time before you can start shooting again. And we've seen significant differences between using slower SD cards and using higher speed SD cards. The other thing that has been quite impressive has been the video side. They've done a lot of work with the video, making the quality and the user experience as best as they can to meet the needs of both consumers and more serious videographers. The sound quality coming out of the built-in mic is really good. We had a question on the website from Stacey Rothwell, if I remember correctly. She wants to see a video of the camera to see how well it's performing, or video from the camera, should we say, to see how well it performs. And we'll get that up onto the website in the next couple of days for you so that you can see exactly how well it works. Well, that's it for the A77. As I said, go to the alphatutorials.co.za website. You'll be able to find the more in-depth review there. What we want to chat now about is the way that your camera reads light, and that is a very critical factor for making exposures. We've spoken in previous podcasts about apertures, shutter speeds, ISO, the 3 ways that we control the light or that we're creating our image with. And we spoke in our last podcast with a tutorial about the exposure modes: program, shutter priority, aperture priority, etc. What we need to bear in mind is how the camera thinks about light. Now, most cameras, including the A77, measure light on a reflected light basis. The light meter that the camera uses is a reflective meter. In other words, it's measuring how much light is bouncing off of your subject, and it tries to measure that light to create the exposure. It's calibrated to what we call 18% reflectance, or if we were to give it a color, it would be a neutral gray color is the term we often use for it. In other words, the camera tries to make sure that everything is about 18% reflectance. And that means if you've got a scene where, for example, a bride in a white dress, there's a lot more than 18% light bouncing off of your subject, then you're going to need, the camera is going to try and make the shutter speeds faster, or close down the aperture to reduce the amount of light coming through, and the color doesn't come out as a strong white, but more as a washed out grey cream color. If you've ever been on a trip to a snow region where the mountains are covered in snow, you will have found a similar situation where the light is just not coming through the way that you expect it to. Now, the way to understand that is to understand how the camera thinks. So when we're photographing a bride in a white dress, we need to know that the camera needs a bit more light than what it thinks it needs. And that's where we start using that exposure compensation feature. On the top of the camera, on the A77, for example, we have that little button with the plus and minus. And we want to hit that, and we want to tell it to add light to the picture. Or if we're photographing a scene like the groom in his black suit, for example, we may want to reduce the amount of light coming into the camera. So those are things where we need to understand the way the camera is thinking about light. In the old days, you got a grey card that you would hold up in front of your camera, measure the light, and then take the photograph. You can do the same with the green patch of grass. You can use that as an 18% reflectance, but bear in mind it doesn't help to measure the light of the grass in the sunlight if your subject is standing in the shadows. So measure the light that your subject's going to be in. We're going to be going into a lot more shorter tutorials as we move forward from this podcast, and focus on the key aspects of the way the camera measures light, the different metering modes that you get, and certain functions on your Alpha camera specifically relating to how you're going to control that and get the best results. But at least you have an understanding now. Go outside, play with it, try and see how the camera's metering light, and if you can get better results by using a grey card from a good camera shop, or using the green grass. Hopefully it's not grey grass. And give us some feedback as to how you found this helping your photographs. We'll see you again on the next show, and we'll dive into things in a little bit more detail. Head over to alphatutorials.co.za, where you'll be able to send us your questions, and we'll be able to answer those for you in the next show.